Let's go live now to Ottawa to get a perspective on the situation in North Africa from political expert Mahdi Darius Nazemroaya. Thanks for being with us. Gaddafi is continuing to talk tough. He's warned again today that thousands of Libyans will die if foreign powers intervene. What do you think intervention would mean for a country already in the grip of a humanitarian crisis?
Intervention would definitely mean more deaths in Libya. A civil war will be ignited to a higher level than it already is. Colonel Gaddafi will also fight to the last man.
You are absolutely sure of that? You think he will fight to the very last, yeah? It's not just talk here.
I am absolutely sure that Colonel Gaddafi means what he says when he'll fight to the last man. This is a dictator who wants to hold on to power, and foreign intervention can only exasperate the problem in Libya. It cannot help in any way. And as a matter of fact, foreign intervention has already begun. The French, the United States, and the British have already sent so-called humanitarian aid to Benghazi, but they've also sent military advisors and special forces. This means that the operations have already begun.
Do you think we could see a similar scenario to what we saw in Iraq?
We are seeing a similar scenario of what happened to Iraq. We're seeing the same stories. We're seeing talks about sanctions, no-fly zones, false reports that have been used to justify the no-fly zones, about aerial strikes on protesters and civilians. This is the exact same scenario as Iraq. In fact, they're starting to talk about chemical weapons in Libya. It was in 2003 that the United States and Britain bona fide Gaddafi as someone who gave up his weapons of mass destruction. Now they're doing an about-face and claiming that Colonel Gaddafi has chemical weapons. No, this is another boogeyman they're creating to justify their foreign policy in regards to Libya.
Looking at what you've seen today, you've had your ear across the latest news, you've seen the news wires. Where do you think this is going? Just today we heard that Gaddafi has failed to retake control over the eastern town of Brengazi, but as you mentioned earlier on, he says he's still determined to cling to power. You think he will to the very end. Do you think he will succeed? Where's he going to go?
Colonel Gaddafi would succeed, and not that I'm an apologist for him. He would succeed against the opposition forces right now in Libya because of his military might. The opposition officials, so-called opposition officials in Benghazi, have asked for military intervention by the United States, by Britain, by France. They have asked for this, knowing full well that they can't take on Colonel Gaddafi. Now, I want to point out that the opposition figures, the leaders in Benghazi, who are regime officials themselves, are very different from the grassroots movement in Libya. They don't want foreign intervention, but their so-called leaders do.
And you're saying let me just get this clear, you're saying without foreign intervention, it looks like Gaddafi would be able to take control?
He's already negotiating with tribes he's already negotiating with tribes and cities in Libya for a peaceful settlement. In fact, it's very ironic that the United States called on protesters in Egypt and the regime to talk things out. But in Libya, we don't see the same principles being applied. We don't see the same principles being applied in Oman or Yemen or Bahrain. But in Libya, we have a whole different story because of oil interests, or black gold, as some may call it.
And is that all that's behind it, do you think?
I think that the United States wants to appropriate Libya's wealth. Now, we're hearing stories about migrants from all over the world rushing out of Libya. This says something about the economic status of Libya. This was a country that wanted to buy British petroleum. They have a lot of money set aside, as well as oil. The United States wants to appropriate Libyan oil. The operations have already begun. The U.S. Senate yesterday passed a resolution for a no-fly zone. They've already made their minds up. The Italian government has canceled or put on hold its friendship treaty with Libya, which allows U.S. and NATO forces to use its bases. Everything has already begun.
What's the human toll going to be here? Already 2,000 Libyans have perished. Where's it going to end, do you think, with regards to the human toll?
Tragically, this is going to escalate. The United States has an interest to make the civil war escalate. Britain has an interest to make the civil war escalate, just like they did in Iraq. After the Gulf War, they told Iraqis that they would come in and they let them fight Saddam. These were people who wanted democracy, Shiites, military officials, Kurds. They wanted to rebel against Saddam. And then they didn't intervene. They let them be slaughtered so they could use it as a pretext for war. Either way, they want the situation to escalate. They're the ones that are fueling the fire in Libya. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't acknowledge the agency of the Libyan people and the Arab people who want to be free of a dictatorship. But the fact simply is that they are fueling the fire in Libya.
All right, well, Mahdi Darius Nazemroaya, research associate, talking to us from Ottawa tonight. Thanks for your thoughts on the programme.